Hey, you're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. A couple times a week, I sit down with another journalist to talk about the biggest news developing right now and how it affects the Pacific Northwest. And I'm happy to welcome back to the show, back to Front Page, Catherine Smith, the KUOW politics editor here in our newsroom. Kat, thank you so much for coming back on. This is going to be fun, talking about headlines.
Thanks for having me back. Let's do it.
Let's get to our top story today.
It's sort of the Wild West. We need to have appropriate regulations and controls to figure out, where data centers can or should be located. And so this gives us the time to develop those regulations.
That is Seattle City Council member Eddie Lin speaking to KIRO 7. The City Council, as expected on Tuesday, passed a one-year moratorium on large data centers within city limits. The council also ordered up a study on how data centers would impact water and power usage and other things like jobs and public health. Greg Kim at the Seattle Times, friend of the show, has more detail here. Seattle's bill would place a one-year freeze on the development of large data centers that use more than 20 megavolt amperes, roughly equivalent to 20 megawatts, with the option to extend the moratorium another 6 months. This comes after, Kat, just that massive backlash that came about after several companies approached Seattle in April to explore building 5 large-scale data centers in the city. What stands out to you about what Seattle's doing here and what it means?
I mean, I think this is an interesting move from the city at, I think, a time when we're at a crossroads as a city. The city already has something like 30 data centers within the city limits already. And so as data centers are getting bigger, more power hungry, more resource intensive, I think this is an interesting time to pause, stop, assess, look at what data exists, look at the existing research, see what criticisms communities have about putting these near them, because there's a backlash happening all over the country right now.
Yeah, everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, people don't want these things sited in their backyards. So, when there's a popular movement like that, sometimes people's fears get ahead of themselves. I think it's right for the city to pause and assess and look at what the facts are.
I think it was interesting. Some of the people who testified before the city council talked about AI-related layoffs, too, as driving some of the backlash. The idea that at the same time there is this rapacious need to expand data centers, which take a lot of electricity, a lot of water. We're starting to see some of the downsides in just the person-to-person effects on the workforce, on how these AI companies are approaching what they think about, workers and things like that. The other thing, I should point out that the 5 proposed data centers were a lot bigger scale than what we've seen before. The combined maximum demand would have been 369 megawatts, which would be roughly...
What does that even mean?
1/3. I know. Well, let me tell you, it'd be roughly 1/3 of what the city uses on an average day, according to Greg Kim.
Oh my God.
Again, so that would have been just a gigantic amount. And I think Seattle City Light was kind of raising the red flag, being like, hey, everybody look over here.
Okay, this is going to
stretch
what Seattle City Light can accommodate. And I think we're also at a moment now where Seattle City Light bills have been going up for a number of reasons. They need to work on the grid's infrastructure. There are environmental plans in the works.
Drought. I mean, we don't get as much water through the dams.
Drought. Yeah. Inflation adds to the higher cost. So we are at a really interesting time, not just for building and constructing new data centers, but also the capacity of our public utilities.
Yeah, there has been this pushback again from companies that are trying to say, hey, we can be good neighbors. So Microsoft recently celebrated 20 years of its data centers in Quincy, Washington, which is by the Columbia River in central South Washington. And Microsoft touted that in Quincy, there has been a reduction in the poverty rate there over the time that Microsoft has been involved in the city. The property tax revenue has been really big for the community. So they've built all kinds of things like a police station and a high school. Lisa Stifler at GeekWire has been reporting on this. And Microsoft also in January announced it was going to be starting this Good Neighbor initiative that included pledging to pay for its own electricity, not taking any local property tax breaks like a lot of data centers in Washington state have been enjoying. So really trying to make the case here, because I think these companies are getting very nervous about this backlash.
Well, and I mean, they should. There's a real groundswell of community opposition to siting these places, especially the mega projects near where people live. People claim that there are effects on their air quality quality, possibly on water quality. And these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. I think that companies have invested so much into AI and growing AI and convincing people to start using AI that if people don't want to site the data centers near where they live, these companies are going to have a really big problem.
Can I just say something about that, though? I'm on the train this morning,
Yeah.
and there's like 40 other people in the car with me. And I had that moment that you sometimes do in modern times where you look up and you realize everyone else around you is on their phone, and you sort of realize how addicted we all are. And I started to think, because I knew we were going to talk about this today, how much of these apps that people are using rely on data centers. Almost all of them.
Right.
All of them, frankly, do of some scale. And all these people in Seattle or the Seattle area are relying on a lot of data centers that are in rural areas like Quincy. And now we've got this moratorium. Isn't it a little rich for Seattleites who are so tech intensive, and many of them are even making the AI technology that needs the data centers, to say, but not here?
So that probably raises questions about power and privilege, and people who live in major metropolitan areas and are politically engaged have the luxury of standing up and trying to block these data centers in our state. That's
Maybe.
good. Drag us, Libby.
Maybe it does.
This is good.
We got a lot to talk about today, but I just, one of the things that I've been thinking about, those
like
moments of like lucidity with everyone staring down, or just really few and far between, because frankly I'm on my phone a lot too. Let's get to our second story on Front Page.
In our schools, digital distractions are causing kids to miss what's written on the whiteboard. They're focusing more on memes than on math.
On memes rather than math, Governor Bob Ferguson and State Superintendent of Public Instruction Chris Rakedahl say, put the phones down, kids. They announced yesterday that they are going to be proposing this statewide K-12 away for the day cell phone policy. So no phones, not even during lunch, for the full school day, unless the child has an exception like a health condition or it's part of their learning plan. This would have to be passed by the legislature, and Ferguson says he wants the ban in place by September of 2027. Your thoughts, Kat?
If I was a kid, I would hate this. I'm so addicted to my phone. I would hate this. I don't know. It's probably a good policy.
Kids hate a lot of things that are probably good for them, though.
I mean, as
so
an
do
adult,
adults.
when I go to a movie or a comedy show and I have to turn my phone off or turn it over at the door, I get like a little bit of anxiety because I'm like, what's the weather going to be like in 2 hours? Or am I going to miss a text?
For me, it's so freeing. It is so nice. That's one of the reasons I go to the theater still to see movies, is because it's the few times when you really have that social pressure of like, you must put it away, you must be in the moment. I think it's important to have those moments. But yeah, for kids, I mean, I understand it's part of their agency, it's part of their socializing. I have to say, I'm not completely sure the data is there on what this does for test scores. In fact, it seems really mixed. It doesn't seem to affect test scores, according to a big study by Stanford and Duke researchers. And you do see a big spike when these full strict bans go into place for expulsions and suspensions, because there's a bunch of discipline that has to happen right away, right?
Yeah, I read some of those too, and I thought that was really interesting. Like, suspensions go up after a ban goes into
place. For a while, yeah. There's like a spike before they kind of all play out. The thing, according to the Stanford and Duke researchers, that does improve is student engagement. Teachers love the bans. They report really great amounts of student engagement increasing. And over a period of couple years, not initially, but over a period of a couple years, students' self-reported well-being tends to go up.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, which is
wow.
Yeah, self-reported, how they're feeling about things. Test scores aren't everything, right?
Sure. I think also, to step away from the kids and look at this through a political lens too. We are so far away from the legislative session, and yet the governor and the state schools chief are deciding to stake out this policy position super early. In theory, to drum up support. They have a lot of time to get people on board. I think the timing of this makes sense because we've seen similar school cell phone bans die in the legislature the last couple of years.
Individual districts have them, like Seattle has a ban.
Seattle just implemented its ban.
Yeah, but this would go further because it would include high school students who can't use their school, under this new proposed ban, they couldn't use the phones during lunch even. Yeah.
Dang. So, I mean, I think they've got runway here to try and drum up support for this in a way that we haven't seen in Olympia in the past. And I think it does bring, I think it would bring Washington up to par with like half the states in the country have some kind of ban on phones in schools, or
there
is it
was
20
like
states?
40 states have some sort of ban, and then
more than I thought.
20 something states have like a very strict ban.
Wow.
Yeah. I want to just note before we move on, we did talk about this a little bit with Seattle school superintendent, and we got a note from Laura, who is a parent of 2 in the Seattle public school system, who said, okay, even with this implemented cell phone ban, we like it, but the kids just switch over to their tablets and laptops, and then they're super distracted during instruction, and the tablets and laptops are allowed during class. And,
That's
Laura kind of indicated that sometimes they're used as like time wasters and kind of like, okay, if you have nothing left to do, you spend time on your laptop. But like that's also a screen and also a factor.
These little scofflaws, they're going to find ways to get around the rules.
Better than we would, I'm sure. Moving on to story number 3, also about schools. Oh my, that's a whistle. So I'm just going to read this headline for this recent story by our KUOW colleague Sarah Mises-Tan. The headline is Transgender Ballot Initiative Could Require Genital Exams for Washington Secondary School Students. And Sarah recently reported on basically how this initiative that will be on voters' November ballots may work in practice if it becomes law. This is one of the latest campaigns from Let's Go Washington. The initiative bans trans K-12 students from competing with the gender they identify with. So it says basically students must compete in athletic activities consistent with their gender assigned at birth. So, Kat, this story has kicked up a lot of anger on the right online, particularly. Yeah. You're Sarah's editor. We talked about this a little offline because there was such a huge response to it. Just before we get to the reaction, can we just hear from you? What does the story actually say? What did Sarah find in her reporting?
So when the initiative came out, we were concerned because this is a confusing initiative. It's complicated. It blends culture wars with the bleeding edge of medicine. And so in our story, we wanted to use plain language to explain how this measure would work in practice if it were to pass this fall. Voters still haven't voted on it. We've heard from both sides of the issue. Supporters of the initiative say that nothing new is going to happen here. The initiative is nothing new. And opponents say it's going to be invasive and scary and discriminatory. So we wanted to see, what do the words in the initiative mean? And how will that play out for kids in real life who want to play sports? How will it affect people's lives?
Basically, the way that somebody would be confirmed to be playing in the sport of that they were assigned, the gender they were assigned at birth.
Right. So the initiative says kids are going to have to verify their sex to play a sport, and it lists 3 ways for them to do that. The language is vague, but basically we learned from talking to doctors and state officials that if the initiative passes, kids can get a genital exam to confirm their reproductive organs. They can get a lab test to determine their chromosomes, or a blood test to measure their testosterone. Now, the easiest of those 3 is the genital exam. You just look with your eyes if you're a doctor, write down what you see. No extra lab test necessary, no question about how to bill for it or how long it's going to take. Visual exam takes 2 seconds. But we learned that this is different from how the state is currently doing things in 2 ways. First, it's a change in the state's 20-year policy allowing trans kids to play on sports teams that align with their gender identity. And second, the physical exam that kids have to get before playing sports, it's called a sports physical, this has not required a doctor to verify sex since before the pandemic. It was a change that happened in 2019. Doctors no longer have to check off male or female on the form for the visit, and they're not required to check genitals. It's up to the parents and kids to self-report sex for now. If the state suddenly requires doctors to verify the sex of a child, that's a change in how things are being done for sports physicals.
I have to say, I played sports all through my junior high and high school life in Washington State, and I never once had a doctor do any kind of genital exam or look.
I don't remember that either.
So that was not, it was listening to your lungs, listening to your heart, talking to you about your physical fitness, can you run a lap around a field, and checking your reflexes. And so to me, initially, I talked to Brian Haywood behind Let's Go Washington initially about this, saying this sounds like it would require something more invasive than what a current, at least physical for girls, looks like. And he didn't think that was the case. And it sounds like still that's what you're hearing from the Let's Go Washington folks.
Yeah, I also feel like there's a hesitance to really talk about the genital exam aspect of this because it does sound invasive and scary. And I think the people that are pushing for this initiative really do believe in their hearts that there is a fairness issue in girls' sports. They don't believe trans girls should be playing in girls' sports because they think they have unfair advantages, and we can debate what
And they
the
also think
science
it's
says.
unsafe. They've said
And they think
they're
it's a
worried about
safety
injuries.
issue. Right.
Yeah.
So these people think that there's a safety and fairness issue, and they don't want to scare people away from that idea. Unfortunately, when we started looking at the initiative, we discovered kids are probably going to have to get kids are likely to have to get some kind of exam, and the genital exam is the easiest one to get.
That's not currently required.
Not currently required to play sports. So that
Yeah.
is a change.
And the blood tests would cost more money, as you said. So in terms of
In
like
theory,
access, I mean,
No
I
one's
was
exactly sure how that's going to work.
Yeah.
A lot
I
of
was
questions.
Reading Sarah's story, and one of the things that one of the doctors who is, we should note, against the initiative, so, as part of a campaign to defeat the initiative, said, oftentimes physicals will be made available in batches, especially to lower income areas,
Right.
because it's, a hurdle to go to get an appointment at a doctor's office. Maybe you don't have a primary care doctor or pediatrician.
So they'll do it in the school gym.
Exactly. And so that kind of thing would be a lot more difficult and a
How
lot
are they
more
going to do
invasive.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the initiative is raising a lot of questions like that. But I also do think the issue is a little bit more complicated than a left-right issue, because while we did hear pushback from the online right, we didn't just get feedback from those people. I've also been talking to people on the left and in the center left, who are also concerned about the initiative. People on the far left that I've talked to tend to not want us to cover this at all. Because they believe in their hearts.
What is their argument there? Because this is going to be on people's ballots in November.
People are going to have to vote on this anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the concern there is that, when we have people who are proponents of this initiative come on, there is a concern that we're platforming bigotry. There are people who are involved in this campaign who don't think trans girls are girls, and they don't think they should be on sports teams that align with their gender identity. I think that's morally wrong. Not everybody thinks that. Again, this is a complicated and nuanced issue, but there's a concern about bigotry.
The polling on this
side.
issue, if you just look at sports in general, is like a 70-30 or 80-20 issue depending on the poll. But most Americans do not believe that athletes in general, trans athletes, should be competing in women's sports. Now, we haven't seen really good polling on this initiative specifically, or I haven't at least. Kat, I think we only have about 40 seconds left. So I just really quickly, before we go, want to put this question to you. I was contacted by somebody who supports the initiative and supports ending trans girls' participation in girls' sports, who basically said the headline is so alarmist that it could create physical dangers for people who support this initiative. What do you think about that it would promote violence?
I talked to this person too, actually, after you mentioned this, and we have covered, there are real instances, documented instances of initiative signature gatherers in the field facing violent threats, having confrontations with members of the public. And I didn't remember this, I'd memory hold this. We did cover this at KUOW back when this trans sports initiative was collecting its signatures.
Signature gatherers being threatened in the field.
Threatened, harassed, having the signature sheets ripped out of their hands, stuff like that. That is a thing that happens, and it's something that weighs on my mind. But we are certainly not telling people to go out and infringe on other people's First Amendment rights. If you feel strongly against an initiative, vote your feelings. Don't threaten somebody in the field.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.